Thank you very much. I've got 20 minutes and I will try and stick to it exactly. So first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. This gives me the opportunity both to try out ideas and also, to get feedback from you and so forth. I do have a message, and I'd like people to pick that message up, and where possible, if we can collaborate afterwards, because we're seeing copyright being used to take our rights away from us and our resources and so forth. The mantra which I have come up with is on my laptop. The right to read is the right to mine. And if you take nothing else away from this session, that's what I want you to take away, that we have a right to do this. Now, it's not a legal right, it's a right that we are fighting for, and it's a right which we will lose unless we fight for it. So, I want to acknowledge one or two people, particularly the Shuttleworth Foundation, which has marvelously funded me over 2 years to set up Content Mine. And Content Mine is a non-profit I've set up because this is the primary device that I have for making the right to read available to everybody. So it's a non-profit. It is deliberately protected against takeover by corporations. We put in what Shuttleworth have developed, an open lock, which means that it cannot be bought by commercial companies. Far too many startups at the moment end up being bought by Elsevier, Springer Nature, and Digital Science and other organizations, so that they do exactly the reverse of what people hope them to do. They become part of the corporate machine. And we have to protect against it. And this is a legal device which is designed to do exactly that. So, scholarly publishing is what I'm going to talk about. Most of you will have been through the higher education or similar process at some stage. The point to realize is this is big data and it's big money. So we spend $500 billion a year on scientific, technical, medical research. And that is intended to be for the benefit of everyone. But actually much of that research never gets out of the laboratories it's published in, and much of the work that does get out ends up behind the paywalls of mega publishers. And that deprives us of huge amounts of valuable research. We would imagine that the multiplier on this was probably a factor of 2 or 3. So actually we're generating over $1 trillion worth of value, and most of that's not being realized. So I want citizens outside academia to realize that there is this huge amount that they're paying for and they are being deprived of by this mechanism, which goes under the name of copyright. So here's an example. My slides are denser than other people's because I'm going to show you some of the details. And I'm also assuming that most people here probably don't know what the details are about text and data mining and why it's important, and actually what the issues are. They're complex, and the European Commission is making them more and more fuzzy as it rewrites the copyright directive. So, this is a typical scientific paper. It's a scientific paper about obesity and disease. And in Cambridge, we had a group who had to read 10,000 papers before they were allowed to publish it because they wanted a complete review of the literature. So this group spent their time, instead of doing research, reading abstracts, having to throw 90% of them away before they were allowed to publish. An enormous waste of high-quality research effort. Now, our software could probably throw 80% of those papers out as false positives, but we are not allowed to do it because it is apparently illegal under copyright to use machines to read what you have the right to read with your eyes. The UK government, as I'll show in a minute, has actually passed an exception which apparently allows you to do it, but I will show you what the problems with that are in a minute. So here's a typical example of what we miss by having science behind paywalls. This paper is 35 years old. Sorry. Is that? Yeah, 35 years old. 1982. It is still behind a paywall, and that paper very simply says, in 1982, we believe there could be an Ebola epidemic in Liberia, and you should take precautions against it. That paper was not widely known because it was behind a paywall, and as a result, the Liberian government suffered this epidemic, and they were appalled about the fact that this paper was not available for their use. Now, the software that we and others are developing could detect this. If you search the literature for Ebola and you search the literature, I have to use the other hand, for Liberia, you would find this paper if you were allowed to do it. And we have software, and our software is all open, and we want you to use it, which could search the whole literature for Ebola and Liberia and all sorts of other things, and put it into an index so you could search it. You may say, well, Google does that already. Well, are we all happy in this room about Google being, our thought process, about the organization which decides what we should and what we shouldn't have? Well, in science, no, because Google actually isn't very good at science. It's not interested in science. So that's right, you're growing into a wonderful world. So we want to develop our search engines which know about chemistry, which know about diseases, and so on. So one way to do things is to have declarations, and declarations are useful, but they don't solve the problem. This is one which I helped to create, where Susan Riley from LIBA ran this about 2 years ago, saying that we should have the right to reuse scholarly knowledge in ways that we decide, and not the quotes content holders unquotes decide. And that we should be able to promote research activity without fear. And I'm going to show later that there is now increasing fear within this area. We are all terrified, no, we're all made afraid by mega publishers about the use of content, and we don't have anyone to defend our rights at the moment. So fear is part of the activity. We should not be restricted from doing a number of things here which we're currently restricted from. And here are some of the benefits of it. That's excellent. Benefits. The benefits range over a whole lot of things. Medical advances, climate, new inventions. SMEs are particularly underprivileged by this. They are restricted from knowledge. And the way they get around this normally is by having a graduate student who's still at a university and feeds them papers. The whole system is broken and corrupt. People who try and run the system properly end up by acting as police to stop people getting information. So, Ian Hargreaves, in the UK, started the process 8 years ago of how do we put this right. And as a result of his studies, there was a proposal that we should change the UK law. This happened in 2014. You don't need to read that, it's just for the date 2014. And it was what was called a statutory instrument, which means that it could be changed by government drafters and the House of Lords. It didn't need to go before the House of Commons. If we had changed it to be for commercial purposes as well as non-commercial, it would have required a change in the law. So this was introduced, and as a result, everybody thought that it was going to be used for text and data mining. In fact, nobody has used it for text and data mining, except myself and a few colleagues. Everybody else only works with open access material because nobody is prepared to use the law on closed material. So the law has failed. It has not generated activity here, it's generated inactivity. And what happens is the people who do it either work on open content or they're young graduate researchers who don't know that they're not allowed to read the literature, right? And so they do it and they don't tell anybody, and we'll show you what happens when the publishers find out what they're doing. So here's Ian Hargreaves and superhero Yulia 2 years ago discussing this, and basically they're saying we have to act on this or nothing will happen. Well, nobody has acted on it in the UK. Not a single university has promoted text and data mining. And the only thing that's happened is that Cambridge University this summer ran a discussion group on it. So we've had a discussion group on it, and JISC is going to do something sometime in the future. But there's been no resources, there has been no support, there's been nothing. So changing the law is not enough, and actually it's worse because it highlights something that was fuzzy before and now you can't do unless you're supported. So here are some of the things that I've come across. Copyright forbids everything unless you're explicitly allowed to do it. So if you go to an expert in this and say, can you do it? The best answer you'll get is probably, but, pay us some money and we'll give you a judgment. Even then, you have to go to court to find out whether you're allowed to do it. The language is awful. What does non-commercial mean? Is teaching non-commercial? I have no idea. Germany decided it was commercial, and then non-commercial, it's a mess. Only public research institutes can do it. Am I a public institute? So what we must do is we must actively encourage this. I'm doing my bit. I want as much of us as possible to urge people actually to get out and do things. Stop talking about it. Talk hasn't done anything. Do something. And in Content Mind, my own organization, we have 3 branches. Advocacy, what we're doing here, this is advocacy. Community, and I want to see if we can pick up some additional community here, and tools. We can't do mining without tools, so we've built the tools. It's all open. We work on top of a number of open tools here, and this is our infrastructure. It looks messy because it is messy. It's because the stuff that publishers produce is appallingly messy. It's PDF based on ideas which were developed in the Victorian era, and there's no idea of communicating with machines in the digital age. But basically this says download, scrape, normalize, and mine. And that's the basic procedure that we go through. Okay, here's a chemical synthesis. This is the sort of thing we mine. If you're a chemist, you'll see this is a recipe. We made this and this. If you click on that, it will actually do what I'm going to show, but I can't do it with this pointer. So in a few hundred milliseconds or less, it will send that to Cambridge, we'll mine it and send it back. So that is actually what text and data mining does for you. Every word in that sentence has been understood, and every chemical has been understood. So the one at the bottom, 4,4-methoxy benzyl piperidine 4-ol, is actually that. And the machine has worked it out for you on the fly. And that's what I call transformative work. It is adding value to this. And that is the value of using things like this. But we can't use this, because if we did it, we would be blocked by every chemical publisher, every closed access chemical publisher. And this has happened this year. So the other two ways are, the other way is community. So we're building a community of young people. Here are three of them. Alexandra is studying papers, she has to read 70,000 papers to get her results out. That's the rat that symbolizes it, right? Oh my gosh, where's it gone? So rat is quite happy to read 70,000 papers because rat is actually part of the machine, as is the kangaroo, right? These are our mascots. And Lars is one of our superstars as well. He's 15 in the Netherlands, and he has written software to mine the literature for pine trees and chemicals. And here's Yulia. Yulia installed the software 2 years ago, and in 15 minutes. So anybody can run it. Now what's the problem? The problem is, and this is another superhero, Chris Hartgerink from the Netherlands, he started to mine the literature, to check statistics, and what happened? Elsevier stopped me doing my research. They wrote to Tilburg and said he was a thief. And he should stop his research, and he stopped doing his research. That has happened to many people. And I only know them anecdotally. So this is the real problem. It's not copyright, it's bullying by the mega publishers and the acquisition of the universities in the process. Illegally downloading content. I'll skip that one, no, it's important. So what we're doing is we're building a system with Wikimedia to index the whole of the open access content there to show what people are missing. And I think I have 1 minute or less. That's what we need to do. We've got to actually do things, and I want young people particularly to get motivated and overthrow this unworkable and unjust system.